Avia dessert. It happened once that la Hokma, intelligence, y el mazal, luck, decided that they would meet one another, for it had been such a long time since those two cronies had met. And so on that day in the kavane, in the coffee house, there waited la Hokma, intelligence. As always, he was on time to the minute. And there he was with his fine starched white shirt con cravata, and with his diamond cuffs, and with his hair combed with brilliantine. And there was el mazal, luck, an hour late, his hair disheveled, his shirt open at the collar, and out of breath. Well, intelligence took one look at luck and shook his head, and he said, late again, you're never on time. What impudence! For everyone in the world knows that I am more important than you. Well, Luck was having a bad day. Yes, even Luck has his bad days too. And he wasn't going to put up with this truck from his old friend Intelligence. And so he turned to Intelligence and he said, oh, is that so? Is that so that you're more important than I am? Well, let me tell you this. And they began arguing. I'm more important. No, I'm more important. No, I'm more important. No, I'm more important, until Luck raised his hand and he said, Patlama! Enough, enough. We're wasting our time arguing about this. Let's go out into the world and let us prove once and for all which of us is more important, intelligence or luck. And so Intelligence and Luck rose up from that coffee house, right up into the clouds, into the sky. And they found a cloud where each of them could sit on side by side. And there they sat, looking down at the whole wide world unfolded at their feet, looking at all the goings-on of mere mortals like us. And at the corner of Intelligence's eye, he saw a poor couple. He was a tailor, and she was his devoted wife, and she was about to deliver their first child. And Intelligence turned to Luck, nudged him with his elbow, and he said, all right, Ijiko, all right, my friend Luck, you'll see who is the most important among us two. And so Intelligence descended from that cloud. And just as she was about to deliver her child, as her son appeared, Intelligence whispered into the ear of that baby boy everything he knew. And when he said everything he knew, he sealed up all the knowledge he put into that baby child, sealed it at the lip, and made that long line between the nose and the lip, which holds all the wisdom of the world. And that baby boy grew up, and indeed he was clever. By the time he was 6 months old, he spoke. He spoke like a child. By the time he was 2, he was so clever as a young man. And by the time of 5, he knew practically everything. And his father, the tailor, was trying to teach him everything he knew. But by the time he was 7 years old, this tailor could not keep up with his very clever young son. He couldn't teach him anything new. And then he thought, my son is far too talented for me. I can't give him any more than I have given. And then he remembered. He remembered he had a friend who lived in the city of the Sultan, a friend who was the Sultan's own tailor. Such a talented man. What wondrous costumes and clothes he had created for the court of the Sultan. And he thought to himself, yes, my son must learn under him and not me, for my friend is a better teacher than I. And so he wrote a letter to his friend, the tailor of the Sultan. And in his letter he said everything about his clever son, how bright, how ingenious he was. And that friend, reading that letter in the city, looking at all his commissions from the Sultan, could only shake his head as he read this letter, filled with all this praise for a boy who was merely 7 years old. And he could only shake his head saying this, Me parece que este salió un poquito loco. I think my friend is losing his mind. He expects me to believe these tall tales that his 7-year-old son is as clever as he says he is. But the tailor, after all, remembered his old friend with fondness, and his heart softened. And so indeed he accepted to have this young boy learn under him to become his apprentice. And so when the 7-year-old boy found himself at the doorstep of the Sultan's own tailor, the Sultan's tailor welcomed him in with all the appropriate buyurun. And so there the young 7-year-old boy began his apprenticeship with the tailor of the Sultan. And it didn't take long. It didn't take long for the Sultan's tailor to realize that everything that was said in that letter was, after all too true. This boy was a genius. His double stitching was something he had never heard of, he had never seen before, and his hemming was the work of angels. And indeed he was happy to have such a clever apprentice work under him. He gave the boy all his most demanding commissions, and the boy completed everything. Every piece he completed was a work of art. And as the days and years passed, the Sultan's tailor became so famous beyond the realm of the Sultan himself. Soon he had commissions from the kings of España, Francia, Inglaterra, from the kings of France, England, and Spain. Everyone was vying to ask the tailor to make their most favorite costumes, their most beautiful clothes. And all these commissions his young apprentice completed to perfection, to absolute beauty. And as the years passed, the Sultan's tailor reputation only grew more and more. And then there came the time that the Sultan's tailor knew that the Sultan's daughter had reached a marriageable age, and that soon she would be married. And who would get the commissions for all the costumes of that lavish wedding? None other than himself. And so a day came when the Sultan gave him audience. And his heart was racing, for he was waiting for the Sultan to announce the marriage of his daughter. But when the Sultan's tailor appeared before the Sultan, that day the Sultan only had a sad face to offer him. He looked down to the ground dejectedly, shaking his head back and forth. The tailor was wondering, why was his Sultan so dejected? "Your Majesty," he said to him, "why do you look so sad?" "How can I not look sad?" said the Sultan. "My daughter, after all, has reached a marriageable age. And each prince I introduce to her, she rejects for one reason or another. One day I presented her one prince, and what did she say? Este es jodro. He's a fatso. And then I presented him another wealthy prince, and what did she say to him? Este es bachico. He's a shorty. And still, I presented him a prince of such power in his realm. And what did she say to that prince? Este le fiede. He stinks. And now I present her any prince I could think of, and she always says, este es esto, este es de no su color, he's this, he's that. And now she refuses to speak to me. And she said she will only marry the man. She will only marry the man that will make her speak again. What will I do? What will I do with such a daughter? Well, that evening the tailor returned home, and his apprentice greeted him. And by that time his apprentice was a handsome young man, with all his cleverness, and some more on top of that. And he could look into the eyes of the tailor and see there was something that was disturbing him. "Master," he said, "why do you look so sad after your visit from the Sultan?" The tailor explained to his apprentice everything. And then when the apprentice heard everything from his master, he said, "Don't worry yourself, Padre. Don't worry yourself. For I am so clever. I will find a way to make the Sultan's daughter speak again. But first you must ask the Sultan for his leave that I can visit his daughter. But I could only do so alone." And so the next day the tailor went to the Sultan and told the Sultan that his apprentice claimed that he would be able to make the Sultan's daughter speak again. And the Sultan was so desperate that he gave leave of his apprentice to visit the princess. And he even allowed the apprentice to be alone in the presence of his own daughter. And so the day came. The day came when the apprentice was led to the palace of the Sultan. And he was brought to a room. And in that room, there were 2 armchairs, one facing the other. Now the wall behind those armchairs had 3 doors. One door led directly into the bedroom of the princess. And the 2 doors on each side, in front of those doors, stood 2 guards of the Sultan's palace. And so the apprentice sat on one of those armchairs. And from that door in the middle, there appeared the princess, who sat on that armchair right across from him. And then the apprentice said to the princess, "Lustra, princess, I promise you I will not force you to speak. All I ask you is that you listen to my story. But you see, I'm a little shy. Those 2 guards standing over there are making me a little nervous. If you grant that they dismiss themselves, I will tell you my story." Well, the princess, without saying a word, turned to the 2 guards and nodded, as if to command them to disappear behind their doors. And that is what they did. And so in that room, when the apprentice was alone with the princess, he told her the following story. "Lustra, princess, I have heard such a story of a tailor, a carpenter, and a school teacher who went on a journey. They went on such a long journey that the evening had appeared and they had not returned home yet, and they found themselves in the middle of the wilderness. And so they decided that they would have to pitch a fire there and sleep in the darkness of that wilderness surrounding them. And so the 3 of them drew straws as to who would hold watch for which part of the evening. And so it was arranged. it was arranged that the first person to hold watch would be the carpenter, and then the second part of the watch would be held by the tailor, and the last watch before the sun rose, that would be taken by the school teacher. And so for the first part of the watch, there was the carpenter. How cold and silent the night was. The stars above him, only the moonlight to give him some cold warmth. And he became very bored and very tired. But then in the middle of that wilderness in the moonlight, he saw there was a block of wood over there. And he said to himself, better to occupy myself with that block of wood and make something of it. And so that is what he did. The carpenter took that block of wood, and from it he fashioned a kukla, a doll that was so lifelike, down to the nose and lips and eyes. And then just as he was about to finish his doll, it was the turn of the tailor to take his turn to hold the watch. ¿Estás oyendo, Lustra? Are you listening, princess? The princess only grunted, saying, Bueno, said the apprentice as he continued his story. Now you see, when the tailor was awake, there he was, the stillness of the night, and he was so tired. He so longed for his blankets to keep him warm in that cool evening air. And all strange thoughts passed through his head. But then in the moonlight he saw that kukla, that doll that the carpenter fashioned. And he said to himself, poor doll, there you sit there in the cold and you don't have fine clothes to cover you. And so at once the tailor opened his trunk, where there were all types of fabrics, and his needles and threads. And with all he had in his trunk, he fashioned the most beautiful fostanico, the most beautiful dress with which he could clothe that doll. And how beautiful that doll was in that exquisite fostanico and that exquisite dress, and how the moonlight only made her more beautiful in this beautiful dress. ¿Estás oyendo, Lustra? Are you listening, princess? Well, the princess only turned to the apprentice and grunted, Bueno, said the apprentice. Very well, said the apprentice as he continued his story. Well, then came the turn of the school teacher. And there he was, the darkest time of the evening before the sunrise. And he was so drowsy, for he was having wonderful dreams until he was woken up in order that he could keep his part of the watch. And he was so drowsy that the moonlight seemed to play tricks on this fostanico in her beautiful dress, that he imagined that she was real. And he thought to himself, I am a school teacher after all, and such a beautiful young girl. What is her beauty? What worth is it if she has no wise wisdom, no intelligence? Let me try to teach her something. And so the school teacher approached the kukla, approached the doll, and began to give her lessons in grammar, in proper speech. But every time he gave a lesson and asked her to repeat it, she just stood there dumb, not saying anything. He was trying to be patient, for that's what he had learned as a school teacher, to be patient with his pupils. And so he taught her some more and more, and then asked her a question to see whether she had taken in his lesson. But there she looked again, with those empty eyes. Well, then the school teacher became so impatient. I've taught you all these things. Is there nothing in your head? Come on, listen to me. And then he began to strike that doll. And when he struck her on the right side, she went, ee. And when she struck her on the left side, she went, ah, ee, ah, ee, ah, ee, ah. And then in the middle, the princess cried out, that's the stupidest story I have ever heard. Who ever heard of a doll speaking? The princess had spoken. This young apprentice had made her speak. And she promised that she would marry the one who would make her speak. And her face became red as a tomato. She was so embarrassed that she ran right through that door in the middle that led to her room and slammed it shut. Well, then the apprentice began to laugh to himself. I am so clever. I am so clever. She fell for that. The easiest trick in the book. I am so clever. I made the princess speak. Well, the apprentice did not have that long to enjoy his cleverness. For as soon as the princess slammed the door to her room, just a few minutes later emerged from those other two doors the guards. And one of them was carrying an axe, and he began to laugh. We knew you wouldn't make her speak. Now we have to lead you to the gallows and cut that pretty neck. The apprentice pleaded with the guards. But wait, you don't understand. I made her speak. Princess, where? He realized the princess wasn't there to corroborate his story. Wait, you don't understand. Call the princess. I made her speak. Don't you believe me? You think we're going to believe your lies, said one of the guards. We're going to take you to the gallows and cut that pretty neck of yours. We were waiting all day for this. And they began to drag him, and he was pleading them, please, call the princess, please. And at that very moment, high up in the cloud, there was Luck, sitting beside Intelligence, seeing everything that was going on. And then with his elbow, he poked at Intelligence, and he said, Now you'll see what Luck could do. And so Luck jumped from that cloud and descended towards the world. And when he fell to the earth, he became a fly. Bzzz, a fly that flew around here and there. Bzzz, and it flew right into the window where the princess was hiding. Bzzz, and it flew around the princess's head. Bzzz, so much so that she became so annoyed that she started, go away, fly. And it went in her hair, and it went in her ear, and she became so annoyed that she ran out of that room into the room where she left the apprentice chasing that fly. Get away from me, get away. And then she saw what happened. She saw what was happening, that the two guards were dragging that poor apprentice, and she cried out, Stop, for this young man has made me speak. And I promised that I would marry him. And so the apprentice was not only saved, but he had as his bride the daughter of the Sultan himself. And what a wedding it was! Everyone was invited. The one that the apprentice had worked for all those years. His own mother and father were invited in ceremony to this great wedding feast. And even Luck was invited. But if truth be told, he took one glass too many of Araki. And so by the time he returned to that cloud where he left Intelligence, he had one drink too many. And with his head going back and forth in a drunken swagger, he turned to Intelligence and he said, You thought you were more important. Well, I'm the one who saved him. Where would he be without me? Where would he be without Luck? Well, now I've shown you. Intelligence wouldn't be satisfied with this, so he turned to Luck and he said, You cheated. That doesn't prove anything. I'm more important than you. And then Luck in his drunken sort said, No, I'm more important. No, I'm more important. I'm more important. And there was Luck and Intelligence arguing, sitting together on that same cloud, arguing so much that all the angels in the other clouds became uncomfortable about this argument, not knowing what to do. And they argued, I'm more important. No, I'm more important. No, I'm more important. No, I'm more important. And it's told that to this day, those two are still arguing again and again the very same question. Qualo? ¿Cuál es más importante? La Hokma o el mazal? What after all? What after all is more important? Intelligence or luck?